It's September 1408. Picture this. It's the big day for the happy couple, and they get married in a stone-clad church in Greenland. But nobody who witnessed that beautiful wedding could have known that the recording of that special day was the last mention of Norse Greenland we would ever have. This is the story of how an entire population vanished. The Viking colony of Greenland was founded in around 985 by the fabulous Erik the Red, who had some sagas written about him. It was made up of farmers. They were Christian settlers, so they were not marauding Vikings. It even built a cathedral at Garda with imported bronze bells. Very swanky. At its peak, there were several thousand Norse Greenlanders living across two settlements, East Settlement and West Settlement. And they traded in Walrus ivory to Europe for centuries. That was their main source of income. The first settlement of the West goes silent around the mid-1300s. A cleric called Ivory travels to the Western settlement. What he finds is really strange. The farms are simply abandoned. There's no bodies, no sign of massacre or invasion. The cattle, the goats, all of the livestock are simply wandering around, feeding themselves. His own personal account says there were no people, neither Christian nor heathen. There would have been Inuit people as well as Norse Viking people there at that point. And despite the occasional tussle, they did live in relative harmony. So there was no battle. But by the end of the 1300s, the Western settlement had ceased to exist, and the Eastern one wasn't far behind it. What they did find when they looked at the Western settlement many years later was what I can only describe as an interesting fashion collection. It certainly helped them to understand what Norse people were wearing in the 1300s. They did find burials, not signs of mass burials, but burials. And it was pretty clear that this place was struggling for timber at this time because they were burying people in their warm woolen clothes rather than in wooden coffins. Why? Because the wood would have been far too expensive. So we are already seeing, even in the burials, that an essential item like wood is in short supply, and that can only make your life very difficult. In fact, burials there had become so difficult that in one case, a runic stick records that they had put a woman called Gundveg into the sea. It says this woman who was called Gunveg was laid overboard into the Greenland Sea. So they were just burying at sea because it was just easier than digging holes and coffins and stuff. But that doesn't get us. Let's get to what happened on the Eastern Front. So, two star-crossed lovers, Thorstein Olafsson and his wife-to-be Sigrid Bjorndotter. The chances that I've said that right are, I'll put them on the screen and you can have a go yourselves. They are blown off course on their trip from Norway to Iceland. And so, 16th of September, 1408 at Hvalsey Church, a very pretty sight, they marry at the Eastern settlement. The two local priests read the marriage banns, which legally have to be read, even back then, on 3 consecutive Sundays, and nobody raised an objection. Why would you? They didn't know them. Not the point. This was totally average and normal wedding. However, when the couple returns to Iceland in around 1410, they have letters which show that they got married. And their personal letters are actually the last mention of the Norse settlement. There is nothing written after that fact about anything to do with that part of Greenland or its people. And it's interesting. It's actually only their personal letters that record it even happening. So in other words, even the priests were not writing stuff down after around 1410, because if you know your history, you know that your main record keepers were priests. That's right. 10 out of 10 if you got it. But yes, they were the ones that could read and write, and they were normally the ones that would keep accurate records. So something has gone wrong if they were not doing that. What went wrong? We're not entirely sure. First of all, the weather was a bit of a problem. If you have seen a map of Greenland, it is in no way green. It would definitely deserve the more suitable name of White Land or Iceland, because it is just covered. 20% of the world's water is actually encapsulated in that ice. Hence why some people want to get their greedy mittens on the place. America cannot have Greenland. However, I digress. So the climate became way harsher and more unpredictable. I've already said people were getting thrown in the sea or wrapped up in their woolies rather than getting a dignified Christian burial in a wooden coffin, because they didn't have the wood. Secondly, do you remember those lovely walrus ivory tusks that they'd been flogging off around Europe? Well, there wasn't a shortage of walruses, but nobody wanted to buy it anymore because they were getting the more exciting African elephant ivory, and that had taken off as a business. So the money wasn't coming in either. Sometimes outposts just become expensive, don't they? It actually costs a country to have it rather than have the country be self-sufficient. We got places like Tristan da Cunha or Pitcairn, where it costs governments to even maintain anything to do with those islands, and they can't set them free either. So I believe it's highly possible that places like Norway and Iceland simply stopped supporting the Greenland efforts. They'd probably heard there wasn't much Greenland. What archaeologists can agree on, even if they don't know exactly why the eastern and western settlements died out for so long and so quietly, is that there was no one single catastrophe that just finished everything off. No final battlefield, no colony-wide mass graves found, no major illness hit them. Just the fact that gradually, over a period of time, people abandoned it. People died off, and it just became too hard with climate change and collapsing trade. It's just way too hard to maintain a life there, and people just decided to leave. They didn't leave as a final desperate letter. There was no, I'm quitting the island. They didn't even chronicle the fact that Greenland was dying. The written story just stops. So you tell me, is it scarier to know that some massacre happened or some major illness took everybody out? Or is it worse to just kind of drift away in a silence, and then suddenly somebody happens to realize that, ooh, remember those people that were on that place? They're no longer there. Wow, which is really scarier? Let me know in the comments below. So that was my mystery for today. I hope you enjoyed it. What exactly did happen to the Norse Greenland people? Greenland is now habitated again, not by very many people either. The western and eastern settlements are up and running, but life is still very harsh there. So if you would like to solve a cold case, why not go in the comments below? So if you are interested in cold cases, have a look in the description. There's a link to a free cold case I've put together for you history detectives.